Hello and welcome to another episode of Unboxing Women, where we explore why women in business are often called such a bitch. We're here for some casual conversation about the gender gap in the music industry, and we also broaden our view to the underlying aspects of modern society in general. My name is Rexx, and I'm an independent recording artist, singer, and songwriter based in Belgium. And with me is my friend Maika Rose, who is also an independent artist, singer, songwriter, and based in Germany. This is a bi-weekly live stream on YouTube, and you can also listen to the show on your favorite podcast platform. Today, we have Kate O'Donnell with us, who is artistic director at Transcreative UK, a transgender-led theatre company aiming to increase the visibility and representation of transgender people in the arts. She is a regular speaker on arts and gender panels, and Kate herself is a transgender woman who transitioned in 2003. Kate, first of all, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Please tell us a bit more about Transcreative and what you are achieving there.
Yeah, hello. It's lovely to be here. So Transcreative came about. I came back to performing because I felt like there was very little trans art that I could see, even just, we're talking 5 or 6 years ago. And I felt like I hadn't performed for a long time. And when I turned 50, I thought it's time to, if not now, then when? So I thought maybe I'm meant to be putting myself on stage and telling my story. So it originally started off by doing some autobiographical shows. And after I'd kind of got a bit of a platform, I thought, okay, so I've got this platform now, but we just need to saturate the arts with more trans work. I believe there's more trans artists. And I really believe if you can't see yourself, you can't be yourself. So I thought I really need to create a platform. And I decided to create a trans arts organisation in the north of England, in Manchester. And just let you know, no one's going to bang on your door and say, hi, why don't you do this? It's very much you have to build it and hope that people will come.
Yeah.
And the last 4 or 5 years, we've proved that trans art doesn't only happen in London. It happens in the north of England. We've given platform to hundreds of trans artists. We have a festival called Trans Vegas, which is very irreverent and a lot of fun. And also we've started to create our trans socials online. So we've kind of realized that trans people don't just want to turn up to an event. They need our community needs nurturing and a space to get together and socialize and get to know each other. So we've kind of created these trans social clubs, which during lockdown have been amazing. But yes, it's quite tiring because we're a tiny team, but it's feeling important. And I think slowly Transcreative are being seen as leaders, and people are approaching us to do projects. So we're splitting the work. I feel like slowly it's not just down to me and my administrator, so that was the plan. And also it means I can go off and be an artist, because I'm still an artist, but I've kind of put some of that on hold to create a space for trans people. So it's balancing those two things.
Right. So what do you mean when you say trans socials? How can I envision that?
Yeah, they were originally live spaces. So originally we wanted to have a space for trans people to come together to go and see shows, but together. So we would maybe meet people at the bus stop or at the tram station. We would get together, have a drink first. People had a social element to go and see a show. So it was also trans people feeling confident together. And so when it was live, we would get quite cheap tickets from theatre. We would blag a load of cheap tickets from theatres, invite people. So they were just beginning, and they were really small and really cute, and it was really intimate. And then suddenly the trans socials, we were like, during lockdown, how can we transport that? So we would do live trans film nights where people could eat their dinner together, and they wouldn't even have to leave their home, and we'd watch trans films, we'd have a discussion, we'd cry, we'd laugh. And they've slowly built up now. We've done probably 10 now, so 1 a month. And they've become quite sophisticated, and they've also become a space for open mic elements now. So every trans social, there is a handover. So it's all well and good saying we need to make more platforms. Sometimes you just need to hand over the mic.
Yeah.
So I'm not very present during those trans socials. Other people host them, curate them, are in the open mics. So yeah, I feel like it's a really sustainable element to trans creative.
Yeah, that must be lovely, because it's also it's kind of, you've created the space and now people are using that space in the way they want to, and that's always a really nice thing, because
Yes.
like you don't know what all would happen when you started it.
No.
So yeah,
and it's very young, it's very non-binary, it's quite multicultural, it's kind of lots of things I'm not, so it's more representative, you know, than an older white trans person. I think it's good, it's broader, a lot of trans masculine. I get excited, I like to tune in, you know, I liaise with them, but then I turn up and I'm like wowed, you know, it's
yeah.
Now, I was wondering, you were saying trans films. My parents were big fans of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I've been watching that movie since, like, I was about 5. Much too young to watch the movie. When you're that young, you don't understand the sexual undertone anyway, and it's, you know, it was very much about the singing and the dancing that attracted me. But when I got older and kept watching it, I came to understand the deeper issues about gender and sexuality and what it means to certain groups of people. I want to know, is the Rocky Horror Show just, you know, for our listeners who might not be aware, the Rocky Horror Show came out in 1975. Okay, so is this something that helped the transgender community, or was it harmful, you think?
I would probably say more harm than good.
Oh, really?
I think so, from where I'm sitting. Because for me, whenever I think of that, I think of cisgendered people dressing up in fishnets.
Yes, okay, I see, yeah.
And parading around. And maybe that's the perception of trans people, trans women especially. So I think it could perpetuate that. I mean, it's great and it's a lot of fun, but I don't think it. I mean, we do these events called Trans Creative at the Movies, where we ask trans people to choose a film from their childhood that spoke to their younger trans self, and often they are films like Big by Tom Hanks, or The Colour Purple, or Mine's Gypsy, the film Gypsy, about Gypsy Rose Lee, about a stripper. Just spoke to me as a child. I don't know why. And I've never had, we've had Oliver, the musical. We've had lots of musicals, actually, The Muppets, but never had the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I think it's probably because it had transsexual in it. It had that element to it. But I never felt like that character was trans.
No, it's more like a cross-dresser, basically.
Yeah, maybe there's cross-dressing. But also cross-dressing is, I would say, part of the spectrum. Like, we're all in a gender spectrum, and I think cross-dressing is probably in there. And it's probably, I'm very interested in cross-dressing, and we don't talk about that much in our trans community, but I think it can definitely be like a stepping stone. Who knows? It'd be so great to make the Rocky Horror Picture Show and that character to be stepped into their gender more, rather than being frivolous. I wonder if there's something in that.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes along with, it ties into, I don't know how long ago this was, but there were a load of articles about when you were offered a role on was it the West End?
Yes.
Yes, and it was not a transgender role, just a female role, which is great. And then there was actually a transgender role for a male transgender person.
So
but
female, there was a character.
Oh, it was female, yes.
So there was a trans character called Pussy, who was trans and from Northern Ireland. So it was called Breakfast in Pluto. And it was quite an interesting project. It's a really amazing film that was done by Neil Jordan, and definitely has a lot of gender politics and national politics. And then, I was really excited because it was a big deal. It was going to premiere in Galway. I'd just done the musical Gypsy, so I'd never done a musical before. It's always good to start doing musicals in your 50s. Can I just say to people out there, never say never. So I was one of the strippers in Gypsy, so I got to sing the brilliant song, You've Got to Have a Gimmick. And I loved it. And then I think word got round, and I did a self-tape, and I got up a part of the mother of Pussy, the adopted mother of Pussy. And I was really excited. I thought, oh my God, I'm a trans performer playing a cisgendered mother, and I get to be vile. I'm a vile, not at all nice mother. I get to be that to a trans character, and that's so dynamic, I think. And I think I should be, for a trans person to get to be horrible on stage with a trans person. It just felt really exciting. And I think you could have sold the show on that. I really feel like you could have the reviews. Definitely. It would have been really interesting, because you don't see two trans people together. You don't see it in that way before. So, and then I found out that they'd cast the female trans role they'd given the part to a cisgendered man.
Yeah.
And I had to leave the show, and I got more press for not being in the show than I probably would have done for being in the show.
The show.
But it was really disappointing, and really, I just think it makes people look really out of touch, and really like you haven't thought about it, and where have you been? You know, and this thing of you know, you're such a bitch. You know, I feel like put in that role, like it got put on me to have to be the one that goes, I'm not going to be in your show. You know what I mean? Rather than the company, who are full of cisgendered white men, can I just say, they took no responsibility. So it kind of came down to me, and then it was I went to the press, and then that makes me a bitch. You know, I decided to. I had a great relationship with the company, actually, and they really respected what I did. But you know, having to pull people up and call people out, I've had to defend that in so many ways. I mean, of course, the trans community were just, they couldn't believe I'd given up a West End role, really. And they really felt that. They understood it, but they also knew the pain of that, because trans people do not get roles in the West End very often. Yeah. And it could have been quite a game changer, really, for my career. You don't do it lightly. I felt like I was maybe, like they wanted to get me on with Piers Morgan, you know, that kind of thing. Immediately they were like, brilliant, gladiatorial, throw you in the ring, go and fight it out now. And I was like, wow, why is no one getting the director in the ring, or the theatre company in the ring, or the people who booked the show, or the people who created it? It very much came down on me to be the spokesperson, to defend myself, to clarify, like it was my job to sort out transphobia in the arts.
Yeah. I mean, I was reading the articles, and from just my perspective, I was like, I completely understand this. Like, I completely understand why you had to give up the role, or you felt like you had to give up the role. And so I do think the articles do a good job of bringing that across. Yeah. But also what struck me was just like the headlines always, a transgender woman. And I'm just like, it catches people's eyes, but that's not what the article is about. So it was very interesting to see that kind of. And you could have had a different headline. You could have had the West End lets down trans actors again. Yeah, it could have been really like, here we go again, like it's never been done before. It's like there is such a long history in the entertainment industry of how trans people's stories have been taken, and you know, we earn those stories. You know, we spent, you know, we've lived those stories. They're based on our lives and our sweat and blood and tears. And I think some people think, oh, we can just cream that off and put it on an episode of Coronation Street, or just and we'll not employ a trans actor. Will not employ a trans writer, not employ a trans technician. You know, there's no fueling it back to the trans community, you know, and I feel like that's the most disappointing. It's like, I always say to trans artists or people, you know, trans activists or whatever, they want us charge double. Like, if they're coming to you, it's because we're really popular or interesting or whatever it is.
If you've hit a chord, then use it.
and just know your power. That actually, like, I get paid to be trans. I always say that to people. I get paid to be trans. Yeah. And that is something people should remember. You know, I love it when I go and work with trans artists and their agent gets involved, and it's like, Jesus Christ, this is going to be hardcore. You know, we're going to have to pay a lot of money for this person. But I'm like, wow, I can learn from that. You know, we should be represented and we should be valued, I think. But getting that across, oh my God, you know, that feels like we should be grateful. They think you should be lucky, you get the scraps, you've got a part. It's a bit like how black performers were treated, how gay performers, you know, there's a long line. We're very much behind a lot of minority groups who've had exactly the same experience. You know, I look very closely to how what black representation was like in film, television, and theatre. You know, and gay representation, and trans is sadly just following exactly the same path.
So, like, would you say that it is, well, probably, but would you say that it is still very hard for performers who are trans to be seen as performers first and then as trans second? Because technically that's the way it should be, I guess?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I deliberately decided to be very visible. And I grew up 20 years ago. You know, you mentioned I transitioned 18, 19 years ago. And I think the climate was very, very different then. People lived in stealth. And the only advice you were given is to try and not look trans. So people didn't know. I was told to burn photographs, move away from where I lived, don't look back. You know, there was kind of advice that I was given. And I did the opposite. I stayed put. I didn't burn any of my photos. I put my photos from my past in shows.
Photos, wow.
You know, I decided to really, I'm going to get in there first. And I just thought, well, why should I separate myself off? I don't believe I transitioned. I made a show called Big Girl's Blouse, which very much talked about me being a trans child when no one knew what trans was. I think I was trans, you know, and people didn't know what that was, but I was definitely trans. As I grew up, I always had been trans, you know, and I kind of failed a bit, you know, few along the way. But I think if I'll never fail at being trans, you know, that's my one certainty.
Well, yeah, that's the whole thing. You were, you know, you felt like you were born in the wrong body, so that's like your whole life. So it doesn't only start when you actually do the transition or decide this. I guess it's just
and not even the wrong body. I think the wrong body is another narrative. The wrong body. That's like, no, my body is fine.
Okay,
my body is fine. I think when we're going into wrong body territory, sometimes I think it can be tricky that people think there's something wrong with us and then we're othered and different. And usually that refers to our genitals. You know, usually it's like a genital conversation. And
which I think so crazy.
It's a very, I mean, it's definitely one I had on my list, you know, difficult conversations. You know, it's definitely one when I thought, wow. And it's the one where you would come across sounding like a bitch because people feel like they have this fascination with your genitals. You know, when they find out you're trans, within minutes, they think they can ask you. Literally, it's not even a minute. I mean, I was on a dating site once and the first question somebody asked is, do you have a clitoris? And I was like, wow, you could buy a girl a drink.
Yeah, exactly.
Really? You could buy a girl a drink
before you ask her about her clitoris.
And then you know, you go through a few responses to that. And, you know, one of them is like, oh, we're talking about genitals. Great. Let's talk about your genitals. And then you are seen as some weird bitch. You know, it's like, wow. So if I did the same as you, if you walked into, and I have had this done, I've literally done a show. Say I've done one of my shows where I pretty much, you get to know a lot about me, and I would hope you are pretty much up to speed. And when you come off stage and the audience really enjoyed it, there were hundreds of people, you felt like everyone got it, you literally come off stage and people say, what have you had done? And you're like, okay, this is never going to go away. It's a bit like those, you know, you hear about black people who train as lawyers or barristers. They go into the courtroom and then somebody thinks they're a cleaner. You know, and you think, okay, I've got this around me. So the next show I made, I had a conversation with my vagina. I thought maybe this will help, you know. So I lit it up in a theatre, like a little mini theatre, the curtains open. I have a conversation with my transgender. I came off that. A member of my family said, was that real? They thought I had some prosthetic. I was like, there is no hope.
Wow.
There is no hope. So it's like you can get tired of those conversations, and you can just be, they're awkward and they're embarrassing. And I think I'm okay because I'm a sassy 50-year-old trans, been there, done it. I think, God, to be like a 13, 14-year-old and you're talking about being trans, or you're a teenager, or you're young, or you're quiet and shy. Imagine the crushingness of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To have somebody talk about your genitals. I mean, we know it's rude to do that, but something happens when you're trans that it's like, well,
it's like open. It's like, oh, we can talk about.
It's like, it's crazy because I saw this and I was like, I don't get this. This is so rude.
Well, but actually, I get it. I do get it. I get it. I get it because I want to know about transgender. I get it. Mm-hmm. I get it. So I am sometimes sitting there opposite a trans person and I am totally wondering what's going on, but I don't say it.
Exactly,
I don't think it's appropriate. I have a
curiosity, but
yes.
Yeah.
Well, I had a friend once who had a boob job done. So this is a female person who just did not have any boobs and she wanted some. So she had them. She had a boob job done. And well, obviously, she's like, she's all healed. And then she comes, to a thing with the friends that we're doing. And well, she starts showing them off because this is, her pride now. And obviously, you go and you touch and but that's because we're friends. It's not some stranger in the street that she says, I did a boob job and, oh, touch him. You can touch him now and look and feel. And, obviously we asked about the operation and did it hurt and what did they do exactly and what's inside it, because you don't really, these things are not transparent and you just want to know. And
I think it's moving it on. I think it's then if you're having a bad day, you come for them. But if you're kind of feeling a bit more generous, you might introduce the concept that gender lives here in your head and not in your pants.
Yes.
And then it's like a can of worms. Some people go, okay. And, they kind of think, I'm going to go away and process that or think about it. Other people, they want to challenge that. They think as a cisgendered person who's had no trans experience, they are the experts. So suddenly they would like to spend a lot of time telling you, a trans person who has been trans all their life and had lots of queer trans experiences, they are going to tell you about what being trans is and what a man and a woman is and what a non-binary person is and how terrible it is or how brilliant it is. And you're like, wow, I've literally now got to sit here and hear about your version of being trans. Okay.
Is that actually, it sounds a lot like mansplaining. So I've
totally
a lot. Yes. But is there a term for it? Because men and women will this transplaining.
I don't know what it is.
Make it up if there's not a term.
Yeah, it's just very, that thing of, it's like people would say to me, they'd find out. The worst thing was, because when I wasn't out, the brilliant thing about creating a trans arts company and making performances, I am really out. And I have bright hair and I am out. Do you know what I mean? And I'm much better out than in, as you can imagine. Imagine me being in. It just does not work. I am an out person. So the more out I am, it gives me a power and it gives me a strength. But I think it's when you're in, it's this. When I was in, it was very difficult because I was sitting on it. I would have to be at the mercy of their opinions. Like, well, I don't mind. You know that thing of, oh, but I'm okay with that. It's like, well, are you? Well, I'm so glad that you're okay with me being trans. It's a bit like you're waiting for approval. And I think that's the tricky bit. And that reminded me of being gay. I was a gay man. I came out in 1981 and there's just been a program on television called It's a Sin, set in 1981. It was very difficult to be a gay person in 1981. HIV, AIDS was kind of being blamed. We were being blamed for that. There was so much prejudice. We were very vulnerable. So I've had a lot of experience of kind of having to come out. And it was very interesting during that program. There was a whole point where they were like, one of the mothers were talking and they were like, I never knew my son was gay. And the other mother went, well, where were you? Why didn't you know? And I suddenly thought, wow, that is so, because the emphasis, if you're other, the emphasis is on you to sort it out and correct people or challenge people or be silent or go home and cry or be fearful or lose your job. It's kind of on you. And I thought, wow, it's so interesting to say to people, what have you done to help a trans person today? Or what have you done as a family member? Why is that family member more vulnerable because they're trans? Why aren't they protected? Why are you making them more vulnerable? What have you done to protect your child or your brother or your sister or your mother or your father? I think it's that feels quite new still, that trans people are expecting to be treated in a better way. And that's going to challenge people. I think that I've been doing it with venues. I'm a trans artist, promoter. So sometimes I've walked into venues where they haven't put our posters up. They haven't prioritized that, or they've booked us at a really terrible time. Or when they program us, they say, oh, you can be on the last day of the long festival when everyone's going home.
Yeah.
And I've started to really kick off.
But do you think that's because of that it's transgender? I mean, I've had that as a female artist, so maybe it's because we're in it together. Because we're not white males.
I would say it's another intersectional aspect to being a woman. I think it adds another layer that maybe they're more familiar with wherever they place cisgendered, women artists. There's definitely a history. We definitely fall in line with that history.
Well, talking about white male privilege, is there anything you think men should realize about their position that we as, what do you call it? You call it cisgender females? So women who are born women?
Not trans. So not women trans. Who aren't trans.
Okay, so
I like to put trans first. It's a bit like the others. So I like, you two are not trans, I'm afraid. I am. Woohoo! I'm not second. It's that whole idea. I like to say that sadly you're not trans. Yeah. So you're the cis. I know.
That's great, because that actually
I got the prize.
To do with but it does have a lot to do with like your the way your mind works, doesn't it? Like as in like people's mind, because if you prioritize something in speech alone, it does make a lot of difference. It's
we can quite easily become, people go, they were just female and the other person was trans. We said it here today actually on this podcast, like they were female. It's like no, actually. That assumes that there's an otherness to that. And I think we need to just kind of broaden that out. But what were we talking about? We were talking about privilege. Now, I'm very interested in male privilege. I think, I've got so much to say because I was born, I lived as a man. So I have male privilege. And I was a white man. So I lived on this planet as a white, seen as a cisgendered man. I lived as a white man. So I had privilege, and I don't think I realized how much privilege I had until I transitioned. It's literally from day one, it just disappeared. You could feel it. You feel it disappearing. You could feel that slipping away. Yeah, you could feel your privilege was disappearing. And some of the privilege, I think that people don't realize is white cisgender men have the privilege to be nice because nobody's really challenging you. The minute I found I was a lot nicer when I was living as a man. The minute you start living as a woman, you're dealing with all the microaggressions. You're
such a
sexism. Bitch. Exactly. You're such a bitch. I literally did a job where I was like the perfect, those controlled tests where I did exactly the same job as a man and then exactly the same job as a woman. So I was a trainer for a charity, and I'd done that job for a few years.
I've heard this before. I've heard you talk about this in a podcast, but what do you mean with trainer? Because I think immediately like a fitness trainer.
No, like a teacher. Like a teacher.
Okay.
A workshop leader. So I stood in front of a class and I had to run workshops and I had to teach them. So, and as a teacher, a trainer, I was really well respected. People would book me because I was funny and I got the job done, and people went out having had a good day, and people felt they knew more about the subject, and they just enjoyed the experience. So I felt very confident working in that world because there's a lot of correlation between performing and being a workshop leader, there's a big crossover. You can entertain people, and help them learn. So I loved it, and I did it for quite a number of years. Stayed in the same organization. I transitioned. So I'm still doing the same job. So I left the job Friday as a man. Monday, I go in as a woman. So my first day of training, I walked in and I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing my training. It's kind of going okay. But very quickly, I realized something was different. And it was coming from some of the men. But suddenly, out of nowhere, I was called bossy. I was just called bossy.
Well, welcome to our world.
Exactly. And then they continued to call me bossy. Somebody else called me bossy. And it wasn't like shouting me down, but it was very much in the room. So in the end, I said, I'm not bossy. I am the boss.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
and we've got to get through this shit. So, and then I think I've spent the last 20 years feeling like that. And then I think that makes you less nice because men can walk into a room and go, hey, everybody likes me. I'm really good at my job. And, but if they were called the names that we were called or ignored, you can be ignored, you can be talked over, called bossy, all those things, you have to use quite a lot of energy to keep your energy up to do your job.
That's absolutely it. It's a lot of energy. And I mean, that begs the question, have you been called a bitch to your face? I want to know this.
I've been called they'd be quite brave to call me a bitch to my face.
It's true.
Have I been called a bitch?
True.
Yeah, I have. I've been called a bitch. I've been called a bitch, like in the street, like driving or in the supermarket. Yeah, I have. Yeah, I have. I have been called a bitch. Yeah.
And well, this is by
I say that's Miss Bitch to you.
This is by people who did not know that you were transgender.
Yeah, they didn't know I was trans.
Well, why do they keep calling us a bitch? Well,
I don't know. I think it's cultural. I think it's a way to like microaggression. It's a way to try and, we're not revered, are we? We're not called powerful. We're called bossy, or we're called loud, or we're called manipulative. And I think it's the language that's used. I think it's also, women have not stepped into these roles for as long as men. It's still not, and culturally in different cultures and different, we're still quite early on in this. And somebody explained that to me. Shakespeare was around 500 years ago, happily writing massive, you'd really struggle to find the women who were doing it creative, especially as creatives. Our history is quite short and we were hidden. The achievements we did have, like Rodin, the sculpture, apparently there was a woman behind their sculpture, they were there. And again, with trans people, again, very hidden, it all feels quite new. And I think we have to take a breath with that and have some hope and optimism that when we establish ourselves more and more and more in the arts, then
that this will get better.
Yeah, and I think we have in some art forms, like dance, maybe we excel over men, and there's certain areas where we've done it, but we need to excel in more like sciences and maths and I don't know, areas that maybe aren't seen as female. So.
Yeah. It's interesting because you said men are called powerful, and when I thought about it, what women are called, even now, it's more women are empowered, which means they have been given the power from somewhere, or they've taken the power, but they're not powerful, which is interesting. So I think I'm going to start calling women powerful instead of empowered, because it feels better.
I think the other thing that is might fit in with that I've kind of used before is my cake analogy when I talk about male privilege. And it's that I realized when I transitioned that I used to eat a lot of cake. I stopped eating cake recently, but I like cake. Those when they have a whole cake and they divide it up. When you go to the counter, they're never equally divided, are they? There's always a bit that's bigger and smaller. And I remember when I transitioned, I would stand there and I would look at the cake and think, great, there's a nice big bit of cake. And I go, hi, I'll have a piece of that cake, please. And as a woman, they would take the small bit. And I would have to say, no, I want the big
the
bit.
big one.
And as a man, I think as a man, I was given the big bit. As a woman, you have to ask.
Yes.
And that is tiring.
Otherwise, it sits on your hips so fast.
And there is that. And then there's this social thing that, feed men up, men get the bigger dinners, women get the, I'd walk into a room when I used to be made a cup of tea, or I'd walk into a room, I wouldn't think I was going to, like, I walk into a room as a woman, as a trainer, as the new people go, are you making the tea?
Yeah, this is the whole problem with double standards. So you have the same cake, but a man gets a different part as the woman, and that has to do with, what does the woman want to look like, or what do we want her to look like? We want her to look like the magazines and all the models in there. So she's not allowed to eat the big piece of cake. And
we give men more, and we give women less. We give men more, we give women less, and that is ongoing. You look at any area of the arts, it's like a pie. And usually, like in my industry, like in the arts, there's a pie, and most of it is being eaten by old, white, straight men.
Yeah.
And there is a tiny little bit left for you if you're lucky. But I always say, we went and made a little trans pie, cisgendered white men have come along and eaten that.
Yeah, they do. Why?
It's like they're greedy.
They are greedy, yeah.
But I don't want to talk about men all the time. Sometimes I feel like, men, we've got to get them on board, and we've got to educate them. We've got to make them know their privilege, and we've got to support women, actually, because you could spend a lot of time, like I'm designing the house. I have a female project. I have a project manager who's female, Turkish, and I chose a very young female designer for the house. And I love those meetings when it's me and them, and I have a trans boyfriend. When we get together, who is socialized as a woman, let's not forget, it works the other way. I have my male privilege. My partner has a socialized as a female experience. So there's challenges within that, but interesting, they say when they transitioned, people stopped laughing at him and started to listen to him and gave him bigger bits of cake. He had the opposite. So there is an absolute correlation between people stop laughing. People say when you're a woman, people laugh at you and they don't listen to you.
Yeah. So this is Taylor Blue, right? I've heard in other podcasts. Yes. So is it just that much easier to understand each other because you've both been on the other side of things? I would imagine it's such a great partnership to be in.
It's perfect. And I was really glad that I gave up on cisgendered, non-trans men. Straight men. I gave up on them, and I remember saying, I'm not going to go out with another straight cisgendered man ever again in my life. My friends were like, how is that going to work? And I was like, I don't know. And I hadn't met Taylor, and I didn't really have much experience with trans men. And I suddenly found like they were the answer. And whenever my girlfriends are struggling, I go out with a trans man. Just forget cisgender.
We need to have Taylor on the show.
He's in the next room.
Yes, bring him in.
Taylor.
It's crazy because what you're saying is, so he transitioned the other way around, and he felt this whole privilege come on to him actually.
And also it's like a man's club, so he also entered the male club.
He's in the man's club. We want to know about the man's club.
Well, the main thing to know about the man's club is that they will protect masculinity at all costs.
Oh.
So before if you were driving into a car park and you can't park your car as a woman, women drivers, Taylor, come here, mate, let me help you get in that spot. Because they have to protect, they do not want men to be demasculinized. So if you're struggling with, say, putting the money to get your trolley for the supermarket, and normally they go, well, come here, love, oh, bloody women, blokes, there you go, mate, sort it out, come on, get out. Got to keep the status quo.
I didn't know this.
Taylor cannot kick off, though. Taylor cannot kick off. Taylor used to kick off more and argue and scream and shout. Taylor can't now as a man because that's seen as aggressive. So there's some things he's lost. So when he was unhappy with a woman, he just somebody messed around. The husband came and knocked on the door and nearly killed him. So Taylor learned quite quickly. I think as a woman, we have maybe a bit more freedom to be angry and aggressive verbally on the street. Whereas I think with men, that would be seen as a fight situation.
Oh, I love this. We are getting all the insider because they don't tell us. I don't even know if they realize.
I don't think they know it. They don't know it. It's
they don't realize it.
It's asking fish about water. They don't even see it.
Exactly.
Male privilege. It's like, but I want there to be. I'm very interested in all that. But then I also want to give, like, the spaces I'm creating with Trans Creative are to give trans people the same experience. So when you're in that social, it's all trans people. You don't have to defend yourself, look over your shoulder, and there is a freedom. And I want everybody should have that freedom. It's like women-only spaces are important, trans-only spaces are important. We need to breathe a little bit more. Black-only spaces, you know, disabled-only space. It's so people can breathe and not feel like they're answering or subconsciously or consciously having to deal with sexism, transphobia. You know, we're here today, aren't we? We're not. There isn't a man sucking the air out the room. You know.
Yeah, no, it's only going to get. It's only going to get. We're only going to get more non-binary and trans and you know all the minorities are only going to get bigger. So we absolutely need to create spaces
to show that they're not minorities. You know, they are in the minority.
How else do you want me to explain?
Yeah, it's true. No, it's true. But I think what you're saying is they're not going to be minorities. You know, and I think it's sad that trans people kind of came along in a way they could have freed everybody up from their gender binaries, because masculinity is not working. The way women have to exist in the world is not working.
No.
You know, we know that like femininity, masculinity, they don't work. They don't work. And I think there is something else. And I feel like the trans kind of version of that is much more interesting and liberating for me. And I think I want people to get to the point where they're like, God, I wish I was trans.
Well, yes, but I did the game with the trans name.
Oh yeah, and
I did. Oh yes, it's.
Should we explain it?
Yeah, explain. I don't know what it is.
I just literally made it up because I was doing a show called You've Changed, and I like to have fun with the audience. I feel there's some real power in humour, so I use humour quite a lot because while you're being funny, you can get so much across, and people are relaxed and they're more able to receive it. And I loved Kate Bush growing up. I was obsessed. I was in Kate Bush fan club, and I was about 14 when their first song came out, Wuthering Heights. I was just wow, literally wow, to quote one of their songs. And I made up this system that I thought, if you want to find your trans name, find whatever gender you're moving into or non-binary name that fits. Find your favorite singer in that gender. Take their first name. So mine was Kate, and then add your mother's maiden name. And my mother's maiden name was O'Donnell. So I changed my name to Kate O'Donnell, and I created like it was a formula. But you get brilliant names like Prince Smith, and you know, a lot of Davids a few years ago when Dave Barry died. But what was yours?
Mine is Freddie Gore.
Freddie Gore's great. Oh my God, that's perfect, because that sounds like rock and roll, doesn't it?
It does, but when I think about it, you know, because you were saying everybody needs to be trans, and then you kind of think about, you know, what would it be like, and I just realized I'm very happy as a woman. I really don't want to be a man.
No.
So,
but trans feels like something different to me, because I don't call myself a trans woman. I call myself trans. Because I feel like I kind of failed at being a man. I think I'm trans femme. If anything, I feel I'm trans femme. I like getting trans in there, but I feel like I failed as being a man, failed at being a woman. But as a trans person, I feel that's the destination. Because I haven't had I will never be I will always feel like a lot of women feel like they're going to fail. And I think we have to find our own version of our gender. Because if you're not careful, you will find somebody else's version of your gender.
That's why it's important to be visible, so that people who are younger and finding themselves can exactly. We've talked about this on other episodes.
You can be kick-ass and be trans. I like people to feel like you can be a bitch, you can be angry, you can be a rock. You know, you can be messy, you can be whatever. You don't have to be like, oh, they're trans and they're so beautiful, they look just like a woman. I mean, that pains me.
Well, you have to be yourself in the end. That's the whole point. To be yourself.
But it's this thing of, they look so much like a woman, therefore you're okay. It's like, imagine somebody saying to you, you look so much like a woman. You'd be like, fuck off. What does that mean? Imagine someone said, it's so nice. You look so much like, well done. You'd be like,
well done.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Why is it so important for the transgender community? This is a question that I had. I'm sorry. I'm like,
do I sound really angry and mad?
No, you don't.
No,
not at all.
I sound like a bitch.
I mean, we've all been called such a bitch. That's why we started this podcast, really, because we were like, if being an assertive, powerful person in a female form means that I'm a bitch, then I'm going to be such a bitch.
I'm going to own it.
That was kind of the premise of the whole thing. So, yeah.
So I wanted to know why it's so important for the transgender community. I think you've answered this already, but to have everyone know that you're a trans person, it just seems, from a very naive standpoint, it seems to me that the identity of the new gender is therefore not taken on fully when, in a lot of people think that that's the ultimate goal, but it's not because it's not not that black and white, is it?
No. And my ultimate goal is not for people to think I'm a cisgendered woman. That isn't my goal. I've had that goal and it was really miserable and really dark. No offense, but passing as a cisgendered white straight woman was fucking miserable and dark, and I don't want to go there. I am much more excited by being seen as what being an out trans person. I feel much more alive. I feel me. I'm a queer. I lived as a gay man. Not many cisgendered white women lived as a gay man. I've had so many different experiences. It just, when people say, like, literally, I think I've said this before, when I transitioned, because I was late 30s, these are the two questions that would come about, I would say, within the first meeting, usually. Are you married? Seriously? And do you have children?
Yes, we get that a lot. And
I think what happens is we get it a lot, and I know you get a lot, because I've never had that. As a gay man, you'll never ask if you've got children. People think you're a paedophile. Marriage has only just come in. It was never on the cards. So it doesn't get asked. So now I say to people, you can ask me that when you've asked 5 men that same question. Go and ask 5 men, are you married and do you have children? Then you can ask me. Or think of a better question to ask.
Yeah.
I always get asked, and why don't you have children?
Oh, and then that's next. So you feel like, that's when I started to feel like I've done all this and I've failed. So I'm going to leave that cisgendered straight world behind. Nobody asked me if I'm married or got kids.
Well,
nobody asked me.
To be fair, like, that's probably not the only reason, but if that's one of the reasons why you say you failed as a cisgendered woman,
then we've all failed.
Then we've all failed.
Yeah, it doesn't work. Exactly. And that to breed, to marry, and to breed. I'm like, wow, have we not only just come out of the cave?
Yeah.
No, we have not yet. Not yet. And
really?
that's one of the things that, are there things that women have to deal with regularly that you were unaware of until after your transition?
Everything. And that's what's worn me out. I am tired. I am worn out. Being a woman is fucking hard work. It's the toughest gig I ever attempted to play.
So
and my sisters are vital to my life. But I had no understanding when I was living as a man what their experience was. And I still don't, because I transitioned very late in life. I was not a 14-year-old girl being touched up by their family members. I didn't have that. Taylor did. Sexualized from the minute you were very young, as a girl. So I feel like I didn't even touch that. Weirdly, I was sexually abused at 16, actually, but it's a very different situation. But I think the way we sexualize people is boys are not sexualized in the same way that girls are sexualized. The pressures on women to be nice are so, I don't think boys are ever expected to be nice.
No.
You know, so I don't feel like I am a woman in that sense, but I feel I am very trans and I'm very femme and I'm very queer. And if I had to be in a room full of people, it would be women. I am a girl's girl. Do you know what I mean? I love women and I support women and I always have. But I think I didn't really understand what sexism was until I transitioned. I had no idea. You have no idea. And I think even, it's just relentless. It's relentless. And I feel like that's why I'm really glad that I've always had my sisters back. You know, I'm very proud of that. But I've got it on a deeper level now. Like I give them the jobs, like with my team that I'm building the house with. It's women. And if I could find some female builders here, I would have women builders and plumbers. I would. I do that in England. I look for women.
Turkey, maybe not. I don't know if they exist yet.
But I would say Turkey is a matriarchy. I feel like women are running the show.
Really? Oh, then
I feel that culturally. I feel like they have the power. It centers around the women. And the end. I feel that. There might be the men on the street kind of, you know, thinking they're in charge.
Thinking.
But I feel there's a different, maybe that's the same in Greece. There's a matriarch.
Yeah, well, Greece,
power that women have.
For the listeners, we had a conversation before we started the show. I grew up in Greece, and actually Kate is living in Turkey right now. So two countries very close to each other. I would not say that Greece is a matriarchy so much. You know, the men are the straight men are very macho and maybe a bit like in Italy as well. You know, it's
Italians very
macho. But still, they Maika sent me a video recently, and apparently they have a female president now. So they're much less inclined to say, "Oh no, you know, we cannot vote a female into this position." Whereas in Belgium, I would think, you know, is a more modern country and you know, is further in that. But we to be fair, we just had a prime minister during the COVID era, because we I don't know, in Belgium we go to vote and then the government just does not get formed. So we've had this. We haven't had a government for like 3 years, but we had to have a government during the COVID crisis to decide stuff. Yeah. So they quickly put in this female prime minister, and we've just, you know, for the crisis, and we've never had that. Obviously, she wasn't voted in, and now that transitional government has gone away, we have a male prime minister again. And to be honest, I don't really see a female prime minister in Belgium for the coming decade, maybe. And whereas in Greece they've been able to do this, and there's a female president. So,
well, I mean, in Germany we've had Angela Merkel for 16 years now, so she's stepping down. But I'm really sad that she's stepping down, because
women in COVID, they've been amazing, haven't they?
Yeah.
Women, I mean, New Zealand, Australia, I mean, they've just been so, I mean, well done them. You know, Angela Merkel being one of them. You know.
The whole of Europe is sad that she's
Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland. You know, just honest. You believe them, you trust them. They're listening to the advice. They're responding to it. There's less toxic masculinity. I mean, Trump and Boris Johnson. If ever you want examples of toxic masculinity, that's where it can end up. Trump is like the pinnacle of toxic masculinity.
Yeah, and
to the point where you literally are overthrowing the White House and think you can get away. I mean, it's amazing. The privilege. I mean, if ever you want to see privilege, you know.
Try seeing a woman attempting that, though.
A black woman attempting it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It'd be like imagine what ridicule. You know, you can just imagine bitch wouldn't even come near it.
Exactly. And would you, if you had known all of this, you know, how much we are oppressed, basically, and all the sexism that we have to deal with every day, would you still have transitioned if you knew this beforehand?
Well, I don't feel like I did transition. I felt like I said, I think I was trans from the off.
Always,
and I think I have. Yeah, and I think probably missed a few. If I'd been born a cisgendered woman, I think my life would have been very different. But I think I look at my sister, I look at her experience, and I can really feel like it gave me a freedom, my queerness and my transness and my, I had a lot of shit to deal with on the street.
Yeah,
being a young queer,
things you experienced.
you have to really. I definitely had my share. I had stuff that you wouldn't have experienced, like as a gay man in the 80s or a feminine little boy. To be a really feminine little boy you're very vulnerable as well. I mean, I think it's a different vulnerability, but I think it has crossovers with the experiences of girls and being young. And I have more connection, I think, with girls' experience. But there's also there are collective experiences, and then there are individual experiences, aren't there, with everybody? And we're three white people, and I think if you had three black people here, a black woman and two amazing black singers who were presenters, they might have a different experience again. And,
true.
I think it's really about, we just know in our hearts, I think, that some people just don't get invited to the table. And when they do, it's for me, I'm an Aquarian, so I like change and I like the future. So I'm always very frustrated with now. I'm like, Kamala Harris, I'm very excited about Kamala Harris.
Oh, yeah, me too. So your birthday is coming up.
Yes.
Mine too. Good. Aquarius, yes.
We're very the current president is quite old, and I think Kamala Harris looks like she might run. I don't know. I don't want anyone to die, so a black woman gets a gig. But I'm like, it's getting. I just love that. I get so excited by that, and I tell you, with the Trump stuff, I just click out. I just click out. And when it all gets like that, I'm like, I've no interest. I find it abhorrent. I find it depressing. When will it end? And then when something exciting comes on, I click back in. That's very me. And I'm like championing women, championing people of color, championing trans people, championing disabled people. Like, when can we see just more? Let's see the richness. I think sometimes it's not a male-female thing. I think it can be a class thing. It can be a race thing. If we had a load of working class young men, black men, I think we might have a different world. I think it's not always about gender as well. I think it's good to look beyond that.
There's a lot of the things that come into play. I just have one more question for you. Which basically is, a lot of people, like prominent people, are transitioning. Well, not a lot, but you see prominent people transitioning. They're in the limelight, so you see the transition. But I was thinking, does that have a more positive or a more negative effect on, like, the kind of average person who's not a performer, who identifies as trans? Do they think they feel more like permission to transition, or do they maybe think
I would hope
this is a performer?
I would hope so. Who was it recently? American. Oh no, I feel terrible now. I can't remember their name. Are they now called Elliot? I'm actually trying to Google it now.
In Belgium, we have a couple of prominent people that are changing or have changed very recently.
Yes, Elliot Page. So, Elliot Page recently transitioned, and before they were a lesbian, and I feel like they're very cool. Do you know what I mean? They're young, they're cool, they've got a great following. I feel like that's probably really, they've been very celebrated in our community. I think Caitlyn Jenner was, I still celebrated that because I love the fact that America's most revered athlete transit. I still love that, and part of the Kardashian thing. I kind of love the messed upness of that, but it really messed with America, and I love that. I think it kind of it was this idea that people could instantly transition, ping, and you're this glamorous woman. I think that did not help a lot of trans people, because I think that put pressure on people to think this is how you transition, right? You know what I mean? There might be the word on the street, might put the pressure on an older trans person who wants to transition from male to female, suddenly feels like, you ain't no Caitlyn Jenner. It could be that pressure.
Right, yeah.
I think the more diverse we see, it's always healthier. Like Laverne Cox, very positive, very smart, very successful, beautiful speaker, great performer, very inspiring. I think those are great, and I think they've got to help. Pose, the cast of Pose, young black trans people being given prime time slots. It's got to help. I feel if I had that, to be honest, I had Nadia who won Big Brother. So Nadia won British Big Brother, and that was in 2003 when I was just transitioning. And the fact that was voted by the public really gave me a lot of hope that they won this massive, what do they call them? Reality TV program.
Yeah.
A trans person won that, and nobody in the house knew they were trans, but people outside knew everything about their transness, and they won. And
That's
another
good.
trans, and I felt that the timing of that was perfect. And I've had people transition on stage after my shows to their parents.
Wow.
So I know that art can create social change, and visibility can create, positive visibility can be very good. But on the other side, if it's negative, and press can take hold of stories and twist them and see the negative, that can also cause quite a lot of harm and damage. So I think it's I'd say on the whole it's positive, and I think people who are brave enough to do that publicly and put themselves out there, it's not an easy task. We had an event last night where somebody Zoom bombed our event, and a load of transphobia, and it was very difficult. We can't pretend it's not a scary place out there for trans people.
Oh yeah, and I live in Belgium, as you know, and it was recently on the news that there is like an 18-month waiting list for people who want to transition because there's not enough places available where this can be done. So here there's only one institute in Ghent, and there's like a definite need for more centers like this. So you transitioned 20 years ago nearly. It must have not been very common back then to find a good place. So how did you find the right people to help you with this?
I was lucky that somebody who I worked with transitioned, and I think if they hadn't transitioned, I don't know if I would have done, because there wasn't really much known. It was very negative, and it wasn't an aspirational thing to be. You did not want to be trans unless you really were trans.
Yeah.
There was nothing culturally. There was no culture, no arts, no personalities, no music. There wasn't anything that represented that positively. It was very much like you're going to have to run away and hide, and burn all your pictures, and disappear, and maybe just keep your head down. So I was very lucky. Somebody transitioned, and they literally wrote me a list, and I still got that list written in hand, and I made a whole show about it called You've Changed, and I photocopied this list and I handed it out to every member of the audience at the end. And it was so fragile. 20 years ago, the internet wasn't brilliant 20 years ago, can I just say? So you didn't have great resources on the internet. You had very strange forums, and I don't know.
Yeah,
it wasn't great. So you were on your own, basically, and you were pretty much had to work it out yourself, and you were very much at the mercy of who came into your life who was trans. And I went private because the waiting lists were long back then. They've not got any better here in the UK. And you were very limited, and you felt like, take it or leave it. So I remortgaged my house, and I told the mortgage people it was for home improvement. So that's how I remortgaged. That's how I got the money, and I went private. And I don't regret that. But also back then, it was very much like, okay, so you need to have hormones, go and see a voice therapist, go and have gender reassignment surgery. Now, that is not the process. So many people don't have gender reassignment surgery. They'd rather go and join a rock band, dye their hair, and have piercings and tattoos. That's how they show their gender. And that is much more, I love that. I respect people who have surgery, but I think now, I might have still had my surgeries, but I think I might have had a better understanding of why I was having them. I felt like that was just what you had to do. In order for me to be trans, I wasn't allowed to be trans. Go and have some facial surgery, breast surgery, gender reassignment surgery, do this. There was never like, maybe you could just be your version of a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And weirdly, I feel like I've come back to it. I've got short blue hair. I'm queerer. My clothes can be like from high femme to boyish. I feel much freer. And I might change some of my surgeries. I might have my breasts removed. So I'm more androgynous. And I think it's an evolution of what I did back then and why I did it. Was it so I wouldn't get beaten up on the street?
Huh.
really.
Well, yeah, I heard you say on the Guilty Feminist podcast by Deborah Francis White, if I'm not mistaken, that you realized that you were talking about this, and you realized that all the people involved in your transition were men. And have you been able to think about that a little more? I mean, should the people transitioning you into a female also be female, and the opposite for trans males?
I think it's much healthier. I think, but now there are more support. There are clinics where that's much more represented. If I walked in some like Clinic Q in London, who do brilliant work with trans, and I got in touch with them. The first person I met when I walked into the door was literally a trans woman who was my age, who was doing my bloods and counselling me, and I was like, wow. And that's the first time I actually spoke more openly about my body. And I think within that half-hour session, I understood more about my gender reassignment surgery and my vagina than I've ever been taught by a male doctor who did the surgery. You know, I understood the makeup of it, and in terms of, just how that works biologically, how it works physically. You know, how different that is to a cisgendered vagina. You know, and I didn't know that, and I was never shown that. They sell you the myth, you know, the doctor surgeons want to take them in and go, now, go away, you have a vagina. But yeah, actually it's not. It's not what, you know, ours is something different. So yeah, I think the more we can have, the closer you are to the source, the better. Always in life, isn't it? The nearer you are. Like if you were trying to sell, like you're both musicians, if you were trying to talk to a theatre director, you might get about a new piece of music you're writing, and then we put you with a female musician who's been writing for years, you'd be like, yes, that's what I'm talking about. You know, I'm sure that the director might have some idea, a male director who just have a bit of music in his shows, but if you put you in front of a female composer and writer, you'd be like, yes. Yeah. You know, they're still involved in the entertainment world, but it could be, you know.
Yeah.
I just have one last question, because we've gone on for hours. Let's wrap it up soon. We just think it's so interesting. So we're like, yes, more information. What can we expect from you and Trans Creative UK post-COVID? Will your festival start up again? Can we come?
Yeah, well, you can come online. I mean, at the moment, if you go to transcreative.uk, our last festival and all our events are online. And so in a way, we've managed to reach this massive audience. 15,000 people came to our last festival. So, and that's much more than it would live. We want to have a mix now. I think it's going to be a hybrid of live and digital. I think digital won't go away, because we've created spaces for trans people all around the world, and who don't feel safe to go out to theatres, who theatres and cinemas and arts venues or event venues, they're not for them. I feel like there's more of a dialogue. The trans socials, I think, have inspired creating a solely trans-only space, have inspired me to do trans-only live events. So I definitely think that will be happening. I think the festival will carry on, and it will get stronger, and I might stepping aside, because I'm very interested in who else needs to come in and take that space and curate, and I'm very interested in that. I'd like to do more writing, personally. I feel there's gaps in theatre and television and film, so I feel like, and literature. So I think I'm very drawn to that, because it's quite tiring, you know, as performers, touring around the country. I haven't missed that so much. I mean, just before lockdown, I was in Gypsy and I did 71 shows over Christmas and New Year.
Wow.
So you can't sustain it. I love it, but it's hard work. I like directing as well. So I think maybe I'll still maybe do some performing if the right part comes along. But no, trans creative is going to keep going. We're getting more. I think it'd be nice to establish us in England, we have like more established companies that are funded long term. So my aim is that we can have that relax and get a proper team. So be playing with the big boys, if you like.
Ooh,
At the moment, we're still like the poor cousin. And I think give us equal standing, then we can grow a little bit more as well.
Yeah.
Because, you know, trans work's really interesting and nuanced and vibrant and needs more nurturing, really. But it's amazing now. If I had to book a gig tomorrow, I could pick up the phone to 50 artists. 5-6 years ago, I wouldn't know where to find them. And some of them have come about because of the work we've done. You know, we have technicians who are trans behind the scenes, you know, trans lighting people, trans digital technicians. We're trying to develop those jobs. we want a trans family.
That's good.
Because a bit like having a female family. It's liberating, isn't it?
Very, very. Well, we want to thank you for coming on the show. Is there any place that our listeners need to go to follow you? Where, please plug.
We're very simple. Transcreative.uk, all our social medias. If you want to follow me, it's Kate O'Donnell, X on Twitter, Kate O'Donnell Presents on Instagram. Come and say hi. And if you're trans, I don't know how far the reach is, but we're international. So come and find us.
We'll leave those in the show notes as well. Yeah,
yes,
we'll
we
put
will
everything
definitely leave those in the show notes. So I guess that's all for today. Thank you for tuning into Unboxing Women. Thank you for being here. And be sure to connect with us on our socials, which you can find in the show notes. Send us a DM and let us know about your experiences with having been called such a bitch. So again, all of the links to Kate's info will be in the show notes. Be sure to check that out as well. And join the movement, and let's make some changes around here. Don't forget to support your favorite artists throughout this wonderful pandemic. And my name is Maika Rose. I've been chatting with Donna Rexx and our wonderful guest Kate O'Donnell. This is a bi-weekly show, and we will be back for you all in 2 weeks' time, same place. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.